first establish a quorum, which I believe we have. We have 6 of 9. Welcome all. We've got a pretty full agenda, but we have plenty of time for discussion. And there's a public comment period this right now, if anyone would like to say anything. Bring it into our attention, or okay. Review of the agenda. We do have a, there's Cora. Hello there. We just started. Okay. We've got a number of different items, and I'm going to hear a great deal from our executive director on a number of different fronts. We will, I believe it's just a governance committee meeting. That's correct. So we'll hear a report there. Going in order, we'll do a brief review of the 3 goals from the planning meeting. We did a visit from charter school office. Actually, I think we've got a couple in the last few weeks. We'll go through performance review methodology, but I think we'll do that relatively quickly because the following item, new leadership job descriptions, I think may make that approach move, given what I think we'll hear in a little bit from Tony on that score, and I know there's some other discussion that we'd like to have on that. I'm going to postpone the requests made to individual board members because I want to follow up with a couple of people between now and the next meeting. I'm hoping actually now that we can schedule a meeting for early next week, because I think as you'll see, we'll have some things that we want to confirm and get set for as a board. I'll hear more on that in the next hour and a half or so. And I think under vice chair, given that was an item from the governance committee, we can hear more from the governance committee on that and what the plan may be. We'll hear from Tony on the head of school search and where that stands. I believe we're getting close to the end of that. I think we'll dispense with the program coordinator item here. We'll get the governance committee piece there as well, and we'll go from there. Questions I need to add? Tony.
Sorry, are we going to do the minutes?
Yes, start with that. Minutes from the April 6th?
April 6th. When's April 6th?
Yeah, we actually have a couple sets of minutes to review.
We moved also your stuff here.
So
which ones will we
I
look
think
at?
make a motion to approve the minutes. The board meeting of January 6th.
Second. Wow.
Second. Is there a discussion?
All those in favor?
Okay. And I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the board meeting on February 3rd. I second that. Any discussion?
February 3rd. Well, we've been approving minutes since January.
We've had some that were not done for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
Discussion. All those in favor? All right. Is there a third or fourth or fifth passel?
Third set. Approve the minutes of, I move to approve the minutes of the board meeting of April 6th.
Second. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Should do it.
Does that bring us up to?
Well, we have one set of regarding the interviews for the head of school that took place. But we have a plan for getting those.
I'd like to say those may take with that.
And I'd like to actually thank James for stepping up to assist with getting caught up on this. We had charged Tony with doing minutes, and that has not worked out, but I think we're taking steps toward getting that work caught up and completed.
I just mentioned an idea too, that will, maybe you and I can pursue, that
Sure.
would bring in someone else to do it.
That was my next point.
Yeah, I think it's.
That's second one.
Yeah, it's
Not as much
Great
as I
idea.
think.
Great idea.
well, and I shouldn't have missed the fact that we're so on, so that's ultimately, it's my responsibility, I think, ultimately. So thanks for pulling us together. But I'll see what we can do about that, because that's a key piece of compliance, obviously.
Right.
And they're legal documents.
So just for clarity, so today are you taking minutes, Tony, or?
I'll continue to type as I can through the chair. Obviously, it's delayed here. There's another plan in place. I found it difficult to talk, explain, and type all at the same time.
Yeah, so I think it's
And report on what you said afterwards.
Tony, I'll take some notes on when you're speaking.
Status of 3 goals. What do you mean?
They want to turn around because there will be a screen over there. So let's see if they want to
Sorry, Dave, for making it a little harder to write. So there were 3 specific goals that came out of the strategic planning meeting. The first was to deliver a quality educational program.
I'm sorry, one quick question for the video. Is this light enough, Michael?
Martin.
Martin, sorry, Martin. Is the light enough for?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
The strategic planning session we had, the full day session, there were 3 goals identified: deliver a quality educational program for all students, to exceed the enrollment target of 150 students, and to engage outside groups to use the school's space. I'm going to start with the last one, which we've had made almost no progress on, other than a meeting with Henry Allen down at the Blackburn Theater to talk about some partnerships, but really in terms of next year. But with the staff we currently have, the time to sort of put this on the priority list with everything else that was going on was just, it ended up drifting further and further down. So something that...
Question about that?
Yeah.
My understanding is there's when I had brought up the issue of having a soccer team use the space, it was drawing up the legalese of it all and dealing with that more than it was staff having to do anything. So has that piece, that seems to be the first piece, if you ask me. I might be wrong because I'm not a lawyer, but the first piece would be figure out the legal aspect of it, and then it would be finding the groups and negotiating all that. Doesn't seem like the hard part.
May I weigh in on this one a bit? We did some, talked to 2 separate insurance people who specialize in the schools and institutions where there's a lot of traffic and visitors. And both were, one who could actually cite our actual policies and binders and say that it is understood that people will come to visit the school. And so our concern, of course, is the liability of what happens if we are covered for that. There are certain other things you can do in terms of asking sponsoring groups to come in and co-sign on liability. So if you have a regular soccer team practice, you would ask the coach or the organizers to sign waivers or certain things. And that would be more likely the case than, say, a lecturer, just comes in as a one-time lecture. Right. So there, in terms of managing the risk of personal injury and possible tort claims afterwards, it's all it's within the document that we have in the binder and the policy we have in place now. And it's just a question
That
of
include damage to the building or?
Oh, that's physical, property, personal injury, pretty much everything that you can anticipate is covered. It's a pretty standard line of business for institutions and schools to have that kind of coverage. The only thing they do ask is that when it comes to an organized group that will be here, or repeat business, you do get some kind of sign-off of liability, because you've got a coach who comes in with a bunch of kids, and so they have to they come here with some acceptance and responsibility.
So there's some sort of form?
Yes, there is, exactly. That's right. So,
and is that the only thing that's holding us back from supposedly getting pushed by the soccer team again?
I think it's policy. Now, the next thing to do is come together with a policy about what that is, and I think we are unfinished in that discussion at this point about that. As I say, there have been a lot of opportunities that have come our way since the one that you mentioned, and it's something we should get on. We should be encouraging that as a public institution.
So is that policy decision going to go to what committee of this board?
Good question.
It would otherwise go to the facilities committee, if we had.
Could it go to the program maybe? So it's a little, I don't know.
It could also, well, it may, especially when it's a strategic element, we really do want to crank up the use of this facility and engage with outside groups. And also I would add that Ambassador Gordo has done an incredible job pulling people in. So if that isn't towing the water, engaging all manner of groups, I don't know what it is. So I'd say it may be that we'll need a facilities committee, especially because there are some elements of the facility that will need some planning and attending to from a board committee too. There's a kitchen to build out. There's some planning to do outside. There are a whole number of things that Nick has brought up. And he said that everyone's on 2 or 3 committees already.
We also have outreach.
We also going to say we can put it back on outreach.
That's
Oh,
true too.
that's a good idea.
So that's good.
That may become facilities and outreach.
That
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Okay. Who's on that committee right now?
By yourself.
Seems like number 1 and number 2 are so important on this list to get right before we worry about number 3.
That's right. We were going backwards up the.
Yeah, that's what I was.
But I'm just saying it's
simplest.
I agree.
It's just when I.
Because no matter what we say, trying to sell it right now.
Yeah, you're right. So
I
you know
just
what?
want to say, when I hear nothing's been done, my question is, okay, what needs to be done to make that happen? And I'm hearing it needs to go to a committee, maybe it's outreach, and it needs to have some sort of paperwork drawn up.
Well,
For sure.
right. So maybe the next piece of this is, if there's a slot on the next meeting, we can.
And when number 1 and number 2 are cooking, I think number 3 things will naturally begin to present themselves. Opportunities.
That's right. In fact,
But right now it's like begging.
Right.
It's like selling bread. Please come and rent our building.
And each of those should feed the other two. So.
Yeah.
Well, then why don't let's put
I
it
just
aside
wanna,
for now.
again-
You're right. It's not the.
The soccer team's going to come around before we know it.
Good.
And I want to be in a position to say, yeah, it
Okay,
works.
well, it only makes sense that communications and outreach becomes facilities and outreach or whatever. And, but let's.
However, anyone that approaches us, I certainly think we should entertain discussion with them.
I think.
We have to have policies to get working place.
Into
first.
place, well.
Okay, so.
And ultimately having someone who coordinates the use of the facility, making sure that things aren't covered, like umbrella liability insurance, but evening supervision and cleanup and all those things. The second really critical strategic planning piece was to exceed the enrollment target of 150 students. We did that. We actually submitted a pre-enrollment of just over 200 students. And huge thanks to the parents, to Gordo, to members of the board, to everyone who made calls, who put up posters, just really kept that cooking. And the phone calls, phone campaigns, it really went extremely well. And so couldn't be happier with that. Puts it in perspective, actually, when I was talking to the head of a charter, it said they're in their 7th year, and it took them to their 5th year to get to that level of pre-enrollment. So it's great. I deliver a quality educational program for all students.
Are you going to address what I've heard about?
Yeah, it comes up later.
It's later in the agenda.
Okay.
Delivering a quality educational program, there are different pieces of it. First, obviously, is directly the program itself. There's a lot going on this Saturday for anyone who's in the area and would like to come up. The Museum of Science will be here. They're doing a morning program with our students. The Star Lab for 4th and 5th graders. This is an inflatable planetarium that the students get involved in putting together and then using for science experiments. And for 6th, 7th, super cold science, in which they are doing experiments with liquid nitrogen. A fantastic event, really exciting for the kids, and we're looking forward to it. And this came because Sarah Gillum was who was our science teacher in 6th, 7. She also is with the Museum of Science and does an overnight program and traveling program with them. We had been involved with the Johns Hopkins Program Center for Talented Youth. 2 of our students in particular were engaged in their International Mathematics and Verbal Talent program, and the school got recognized for their achievement and involvement in that. So that's exciting and something that we want to keep going. In addition, in terms of hiring, which is another part of delivering an outstanding program, we've hired a director of student life, and he is to have someone who can be directly involved in mentoring young students and working with teachers, not just on discipline, which of course he does work on, but also on the development of character and values program within the school. We've hired a new 4 or 5 teachers. This was what have we done since January, with special education licensure, which is a model that I hope we continue with in terms of hiring. And we've also hired additional special education support and assessment, administration, and teaching, which was part of our corrective action plan to bring the school into compliance.
So what can you, sorry, can you go back to that for a second? What is specifically the additional support and special ed?
We have a speech-language group that comes in, speech-language therapy.
Which you've had before, you've had that all along, haven't you?
Yeah, so we increased the number of hours of support there. We also have Dr. Welling, who specializes in assessment and has been doing all the testing necessary for us to bring to, when you have special ed files that come from another district, the legal requirement is to meet whatever that IEP is that comes in from the district. The goal is to have all of our files up to date in terms of assessments that have been done here ultimately. And Dr. Welling is doing those. Increasing the administration support, because the model we had for this year was that our special ed director, Carol Gurley, would be 50% time administrative and 50% time in the classroom, but she's really needed much more in the classroom. And so by hiring out the administration piece, we've been able to get more hours of Carol's time in the classroom rather than doing the inordinate amount of filing and record keeping that goes into that.
So there's somebody that's just doing that, the record keeping?
Yes, yeah. And so part of it, I hope we'll continue with, there's several charter schools actually share services in that way, so none of them pay for full-time administration. They have an administrator who, or a director of special ed who does that by going to three different schools, and it's far more efficient and less expensive to do it that way. And then we've added another half-time teaching special education teacher who's providing additional hours as well, both in the classroom and in pull-outs when necessary.
So knowing that that was an issue in terms of compliance with students getting the hours that they need, does that half-time position and Carol being freed up more have every kid then meet the requirements that they need for their hours?
They'll still, because of the time frame from when we receive the files from the district in November, we're actually able to review the files and start to put the special ed services and support into place. Some will still need to come to the summer program.
Sorry, that's not what I'm asking about. Right now, today, or whatever, are there enough teaching hours that every kid is getting the services they need. Do you know what I mean?
I believe so.
Not from
in terms
November
of,
or
we're
whatever,
not managing to correct what went before.
Exactly,
But
just
for right now,
currently,
yes.
there is enough staff and
Yes.
that's being met.
Yeah, there is.
And at some point, I hate to be so picky, but I'd like to understand more about the director of student life. Maybe that's not now, but it's a position that I don't quite understand.
Sure.
So I don't know when the right time is for that.
Well, and just the main component of it in terms of right now is that we know we have school in place and me trying to be 4 different people. There are times when you really need to be able to have a conversation with students that may not happen in class. And they really need to talk to somebody. And
So is this person a counselor then?
Well, I mean, they're serving in terms of some of that capacity, in terms of the long term, whether the school would have a counselor or not. I think that's a really good question, and that one that when the head of school is in place, and as we look at where our budget is for next year, and the head of school begins to think about what they feel they'd like to have in place, I'm absolutely positive that question will come up.
Yeah.
But what this has done, which I think, one of the difficulties in a board meeting, of course, is you can't have public comment going back and forth with your guests, but I think the feedback from parents is overwhelmingly positive in terms of the benefit of having this person here and the work that they're already doing, perceptive.
I mean, I'm challenging the person, I'm trying to understand the position, because I've never known of that kind of a position. And when I hear someone talking to kids, I'm assuming they have a counseling background. And I also assume that kids are meant to stay in class and not be leaving class.
I've seen that position before. It's not a counselor, but it's more mentoring, and it can be just conversational. It's actually, it helps to pull, it helps with conversations that happen outside the classroom, especially if someone looks like they could be getting into trouble or one way or the other. But I think it's a perfectly reasonable thing to look at as the budget starts to firm up, as we get a sense for who's coming aboard, and it reasonably belongs with the program committee. It's a perfectly reasonable thing to be looking at and asking questions about, I think. That sound right?
Sure. Then in terms of
one question on this issue there is, we're going to follow up later on about where we stand with the corrective action plan and so forth.
Yeah.
I assume you're not getting into that right now. And also, regarding plans for the summer program, where do we stand with that?
I'll answer that now, but the invitation is going out to parents this week with a return card. We have, I think, 27 students who could attend this summer program.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to get a sense of the number of students that would attend so we get a better sense of staffing. The dates are already defined for the program, and it would go from 9 to 12, 5 days a week for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Culture of learning and engagement, the Visiting Artist Series, the board has, I'm just going to say, he seems to know every artist in Gloucester and Cape Ann, North Shore. We've had, how many artists in?
I think we've done 12, and I got 3 more today.
And the kids love it. This is Chris Williams, fantastic sculptor who came in, talking about his work. His work is unbelievable. This is one of his more famous pieces. They're all done in metals. So he had his helmet and torch, and the kids just went crazy over. Any of you who've flown out of Manchester Airport, New Hampshire, may have seen his moose, full-size moose that was in there. So the artists come in and they talk about how they got into doing what they do. And he actually brought in the first piece he'd ever done, just using wires to create different objects, tiny with a soldering gun. And then he started doing it when he was their age, and it just blossomed into a career. So that's been absolutely fantastic. We had a talent show It's getting more and more involved in music. There were, I think, just over 300 people here for that event. And special thanks again to Gordon for putting together stage, lighting, emceeing, working with the kids in terms of performance. And so some of what we've talked about in terms of the importance of arts and how it informs education absolutely happened there. You had kids who were practicing, then getting critique, sometimes whether they wanted it or not, from Gordon, about how to improve what they were doing and to take that back and think about it and then come back and work on it again. We'll have a CD of that available. One of the parents is putting it together into a show. People will be able to sort of get a CD, a DVD, and see the students performing. But just a great event. And the other piece that makes for great education is community and involvement of parents. We have had movie nights and GCA roller skating evening. This was great fun. You probably can't see it quite there, but the whole school went to do this event with families coming as well. And that very strong connection amongst the GCA families has continued. Even with the rather horrible attempts of the executive director of the state. And facilities, and with the closure of borders on Route 114, we went up and were offered bookcases as long as we would take them apart. And again, thank you to Gordon for coming with me and with his truck and our cordless screwdrivers, and we took them apart and picked up 9, 10, or 11 different units. And Pam and Aaron Chalufo did that as well. So it's great to get that. So I guess this is the next. So that's really, in terms of educational program, these are some of the things that are going on at the school.
Good. Questions for Tony?
We, as part of the strategic planning, we did back in January, and I think you're basing the goals off of that. We identified a number of goals under program quality. Some of them, I think, we found to be more challenging to even get into, given what the staff have to do on a daily basis and what you have to do. One of those was around getting more feedback from parents. Has there been a survey that's gone out for parents to get feedback?
Yeah.
Is there results of that tabulated somehow, or?
Yeah, I could actually, I mean, at the next board meeting, I can give you a full report on that in terms of a good return on that, in terms of the number of parents who actually took the survey, the questions that they responded to. It allows you to select on different criteria so that teachers within, because the real benefit of a survey like that is how it informs practice. And so the questions are actually designed in that way, you can actually sort it by gender within the classroom, by grades, so even though they're combined grades, you can look and see how the responses vary from parents of students in grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, and grade 7. And if there's a difference in response of families with gender students. So, but yeah, I'd be happy to sort of put it up for you on the next, just so you can see the survey.
Have there been some adjustments made, perhaps by faculty or?
Yeah, I mean, it was more I mean, I'd rather put together a full report that was tied directly to the data, but there were,
especially because we're actually off agenda.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. That's a legitimate question, but I think if we can address it next time fully, is that all right, Dave? Or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it does fall under one of the 3 goals, the strategic goals, so I think it's not actually off agenda.
No, the survey itself, though.
Okay. And the other, what's the other thing I was going to ask you? Oh, about evaluation of staff, is there a plan to do some evaluation of staff?
Yeah, to use this model. I mean, I have gone into classrooms already, and then in terms of those who have received their contracts, as part of that meeting where the contract was offered a review, there was an evaluation and assessment piece of it. But separating out contractual evaluation from from assessment and evaluation that informs practice and leads to professional development, that model involves both peer assessment and self-assessment as a critical element of it. And that needs to be implemented still. But yeah, there are plans to do that.
Other questions for Tom? Number 6. Thanks, Tom. So why don't we cover, we'll make sure to put on the agenda the parent survey and a review of that. We'll remember to do that. So number 6.
So number 6, this is, for those who don't have agendas in front of them, this is the reporting on the visit by the DOE, Barry Barnett, Ruth Hirsch from the Charter Office. Barry Barnett is the acting director at this point, and Ruth Hirsch is director of New Schools. The items bulleted on the agenda are those that they asked for a report or an update on at the end of that meeting. And the first had to do with pre-enrollment materials, and we put those together for them. They actually had not requested it prior to coming, and so we actually have pre-enrollment materials that come from 3 different areas. Parents can apply online, they can fill in a form at the open house, and they can also call in and ask for a form to be filled in and ask for themselves to be put in the lottery, and they can email. So, we had sent in this pre-enrollment material to 200 plus students, and they came back and had reduced it because there were a few duplicates in it, but primarily because they indicated that on the form, some of the families that filled it in at our open house had not ticked. If you look in the middle here, you'll see that it says, please include me in the next lottery, yes or no. And they had not ticked either yes or no. But they had filled the form in. There are tables, 2 tables at the open house. One is for signing up for the lottery, and the other is for signing up for a mailing list and being welcome. They actually used completely different forms. So they indicated that they, and have indicated at this point that they are questioning whether they will validate those who were put into the lottery who had not checked either yes or no, because the department was going to interpret that and say no. And what we've indicated back to them is that these 2 tables were there, that everyone who filled in that form was clearly signing up for the lottery. The fact that the majority of the forms that had neither yes or no ticked were actually from current families at the school who were putting a sibling into the lottery of the child who was already here. What we have suggested to the department is that it would actually make much more sense, given that these families have now already enrolled. So they went to a table at an open house, signed up for a lottery knowingly, were put into the lottery, which is a legal and public event, were chosen in the lottery, and then exercised their right to choose and signed up fully by signing an enrollment agreement. We have said to the department that wouldn't it make more sense if you just give us the names of those who you have questioned, and we will immediately scan and send you their enrollment agreement. Because obviously the intent, which is what they've indicated in their email, it was their desire really to be put in the lottery there. And clearly, since they've already enrolled, their intent is clear. So we hope that that will carry, and they'll put our enrollment back it should be.
How many are you talking about?
I beg your pardon?
How many are they talking about?
Well,
Discrepancy.
they, at the moment, it's indicated that instead of the 200, that we're at 182. So, yeah, I mean, it's still it's obviously an
And
outstanding.
all those are ones that they didn't check, or some of those duplicates could be.
There are a couple.
You don't know.
There
You
were
don't
a couple
know.
of duplicates, but they haven't given us the names yet.
So you don't know what's
Right.
there.
That's right.
Why did they say prepare a budget for 165?
Because they were, I'm going to answer this, because in fact, I talked to them after the letter was received, which went to both of us, both the acting chair and the executive director. And the idea was, in a worst case, let's assume that there's fall. If it goes to 182, so of 182, let's assume that another 17 don't show up, 10% roughly. So now give us a budget at 165 that shows that you're financially viable, which we can do.
Yeah.
The CFOs, you and the CFO have been talking, and it's not hard to do.
No, we already, because we actually engage a budgeting process that is extremely conservative, so that our budget was built on a per student allotment that was $700 less than we received this year.
And if you remember,
So-
we still had $140,000 that we couldn't figure out quite what to.
Yeah, and nearly 200,000. And then, so even if the budget was level funded, there was an additional 140,000 in there, so nearly 340,000 at the prior level. So we should be able to, even if in a worst case scenario we were at 182, as far as they were concerned, we should be able to deliver the program without any, that we've already put in the budget, without any change there. So, and I don't want to lose sight of the fact that you've got many charters that are increasing by 10, 20, maybe 30 students from year to year in those first few years. Like I was saying, that charter school in New Hampshire, it took them 5 years to get to this level of enrollment. It's still an extraordinary result. What's, I think, difficult about this is that clearly the families were signing up for lottery, and they missed the form, the line completely. They take yes or no, and they have since enrolled. So we sort of put the question out to them, given that they went through this lottery process, so they have been selected in a formal lottery and they have enrolled, are you indicating that due to this clerical error, you are avoiding their attendance? And I would hope that reason would be supported there, and that we won't have that issue.
If we sort this out, along the lines of reason, that's good. But if they persist in, invalidating parents who have actually signed up for the school, we should fight that.
Absolutely.
With every resource we have. And I think it will not be hard to do so. If they're already, in the school or signed up, I think that's outrageous.
Well, there's as I understand it, and this from the consultant that we were talking about today at lunch, it's not that unusual to be challenged on the enrollments.
Well, it's probably their job, but when we have people already,
You would seem to think that they intended to enroll
that
if
seems
they
like a
actually.
strong argument
I would
to the test.
Yeah, that's why I think, and I think it's just a matter of getting a hold of them. I know Barry Barnett's been on the road apparently all the time, which is what he said.
Just a quick question regarding this 165, as Joe explained, that's really their version of a stress test.
Right.
What would happen if it never came like this? But they also, was there a deadline to when they want that? Was there an indication that they wanted Olivia Gordon, who also sits on the finance committee with you, and I wondered how soon we have to prepare something.
No,
Yeah,
We really should be scheduling
that stress test scenario.
We really should be scheduling a meeting for next week. The finance committee would need to schedule a meeting for next week.
But it's not, I mean, the spreadsheets aren't difficult to
Okay,
adjust.
fine, Joe.
Depending on where the 35 comes from.
Perhaps we could get the 18 families to sign a letter that said that it was their intent to enroll when they filled out the form at the table, because they all did it.
Right.
And so if they're being told, well, they're being weird about it, so at least you could say to Barnett, compromise, we'll get the letter that each family can say, yes, that was our intent. when
I
we
do think
signed
that there are standard ways to file with them.
And I think they'll be, I actually believe they will be supportive of this and this argument. The issue came up because for some charters, they would have an event like that, they would take every name they could and put them all in their lottery to increase their numbers. And when they did do, so you're absolutely right, this is not an unusual thing.
No, it's not.
And they would make calls to check in, and the families would indicate, no, we never signed up for the lottery. That's not the case here at all. We've got, families that are absolutely enrolled, so they're coming. I don't think it'll be a major issue.
Right. To go back to these bulleted items, which I think this is part of that. Does it make sense to go down each of these, Tony, to see where we are or what we need to do?
Well, this has all been completed, so they have all these materials in.
They do,
there.
okay.
Yeah. So current staff roster indicating full or part-time staff, including special education staff roles and responsibilities. They have that report. The printout of finance files, initially I didn't understand what that was. And that was when we sent them the budget.
Right.
They couldn't get all the tabs.
Okay.
So they just wanted a hard copy.
Yeah.
An updated list of team meetings. This was from special ed, so they just wanted to see where we were in terms of those team meetings that they were scheduled, had they been held, and had the IEPs been signed and accepted by the families. So we sent an update on that. Thorough update on conditions, including an update on staffing changes and how staffing decisions were made. These were the conditions that the BESC defined back on December 21, and we gave them that update. And Joe, Chair, you had given an update actually just a few weeks prior directly to the Commissioner.
Tony, I'm sorry to interrupt, but on that, had you been providing that information on an ongoing basis over the course of
the conditions?
The hiring, staffing?
Yeah, staffing change is the only one where we didn't do that was much earlier on, which we recognized, and I think, Joe, you talked about it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm asking because my understanding was you were doing that, you had said that along the course of many meetings that we've had, so I was surprised to see that list on the list.
When I talk to them, the difficulty is it's not a standard filing. So the question is, all right, so when should we get that to you? And who does it go to? And in what form?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the conversation stopped, because they didn't answer the question. But having said that, now we'll do it the way we're doing it. It goes right to Barry Barnett, I assume, not Ruth, or Jeff Wolfson, and and there'll be a lot of that coming up.
So they have the latest, the new grade 4-5 teacher. And
correct.
And the latest facts.
Yeah. And I think that the issue here was one, so not have any surprises, and it wasn't that they were sort of thinking, well, these happen, where are they? It wasn't that. The tone of the meeting was not that. It was to make sure and get an update, so if there was anything that had been missed, they could let us know. And the same with the monthly updates for Barry Barnett. This was going forward from April 1 on, and they define some things that they have been happening. So our legal counsel has been letting you know if there's anything going on there, any exchange of documents or communications, etc. But they just wanted to make sure that even if you believe it's happened, can we just get a monthly update where we know that there won't be anything missed, and we can just make sure that we've got everything. Job descriptions, which we're going to talk about later, for head of school, program coordinator, and executive director, if they had changed. And so they are, paying attention to what we're doing, and this was something that was in discussion.
Right, that's right. You and I both had that conversation with them earlier, so.
Plan for lunch program next year. We updated them on that. This was this year we started with one vendor, and then because we didn't have enough hot deals being ordered, the vendor indicated that they couldn't. It just wasn't financially profitable enough to continue to do it. And so we sent them an update indicating that we were back in touch with 2 different vendors, and that we would make a decision to let them know as soon as that program was set up for next year. And then copies of all board minutes since December 2010.
Can I ask a question about that? Does
Yeah.
that require the kitchen that I just heard about to be done?
No,
You have those warming ovens or something, or whatever you got?
They come in warming.
Whatever.
they
So-
come to
so,
the
yeah, it
meals
doesn't-
are sealed and repaired, and they
So you don't need the kitchen?
so we shouldn't need that, and it gets you to a whole different sort of area in terms of trained staff once you start delivering your own meals.
And reporting, and it's, Luba, I remember Luba saying, think long and hard about this.
Well, I heard you say kitchen, so I didn't know.
Okay, no,
Pay,
these are nice
fee when you order the kids.
Yeah, they pay for
They
it.
pay for them.
Yeah. And then copies of all board minutes was the last one, and I indicated that we put them directly online as quickly as we can after they're approved, and that all of them were there, and that if they needed anything additional, they should let me know. So,
Oh, there are other minutes that they have to see, so we'll get those things.
right.
And a moment we.
Oh, we covered one, we covered.
And then there was a visit on the 28th.
There was, then they came back to really go through special education files.
Okay.
And it was a great visit, unbelievably helpful. And we had the administration, subcontractor administration person here, and Carol and Judy Miller and Barry Barnett came and spent the entire day and went through all our files. And were very positive in their comments on the improvement since in the beginning of the corrective action plan being put together, and the real concrete steps of having this team of a professional assessor who's really taken the testing and getting testing up to date off of Carol's desk, the administration piece, and then the addition of staff to provide the kind of freeing up of Carol's time to be in the classroom. And so it was a very good meeting. They're very complimentary, and they give you very specific ideas on how you can improve what you're doing. So it was a great visit.
They sat through morning meeting.
They said good morning meeting. We had an artist here, a painter, I think.
Photographer,
Yeah. So it was great.
Have we gotten anything from them since then?
No.
On that visit? Do we expect anything?
We should probably follow up regardless and just get any additional feedback from them, just
If we need to.
Yeah.
Were there any areas that do need more attention?
No, I think that they want us to continue to do what we're doing, basically. And it was actually from Barry that this thought around continuing to stick with a plan where your special education director that her role really should be overseeing special education teachers, regular classroom teachers, making sure that the collaboration there is happening, and that the administrative role, which we've sort of been putting together, the special education director is sort of an administrative piece. And they were saying, he was encouraging us not to use that model. And that this model where you share your administrative staff with other schools, it's more efficient, less costly, and that it keeps your resource in terms of the full-time resource who know your students in the classroom working together with teachers. Mm-hmm. And that they were, we were talking about the intern program, and that we'd been in touch with Salem State and with Endicott, and that our goal was to have this internship program that would be part of the provision of service next year, and they were very supportive of that. Felt that was a really good way to go.
Mm-hmm. So the scenario you described where you have some consultants currently working, doing some of the administrative tasks, is part of that whole plan of sharing roles among schools. So,
yeah.
So we're already involved in that. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah, the one caveat they had is that there's a flow to your special ed administration as well. So at the beginning of the year, everyone has a lot of new files, everyone's going through them, everyone's in high level of assessment and reevaluation. And they said if you are putting this together with other schools, you need to make sure that you define the hours that you'll receive during those critical weeks, because sometimes what happens is that the squeaky wheel will get the service, and that you really want to have it well defined, because everyone is in high gear in certain levels, types of administration at exactly the same time.
Yeah, right.
So that was it's good to know.
That's a good heads up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tony, I thank you for for the presentation, and also for all the preparation that goes into making these meetings happen with staff and so forth.
Other questions for Tom? The next item, I'm going to suggest we switch the order of the next two. The next one is listed as performance review methodology. A key responsibility of the board is to review the performance of the executive director and other members of the leadership team as appropriate. The board will hear an explanation of leadership review methodology. This discussion will address the specifics of a variety of review methodologies and thinking behind the same, as well as timing for a possible review. The next item is new leadership job descriptions, wherein the board will discuss new job descriptions for each of the 3 leadership roles: executive director, head of school, and program coordinator. The board will vote on accepting these job descriptions and the reporting relationships between them. Obviously, how we proceed with these will necessarily have an impact on review methodology and the timing of the same. So why don't we move, if it's okay with the group, we'll move right to the discussion of these new leadership job descriptions. Have everyone seen them? Yes. Had a chance to look at them? Yeah.
Through the chair, I think that it's just, everyone who's been going through this year knows how hard it's been with the lack of resource and the challenges that's created. And I think what's really exciting about these job descriptions is that the fact that we can even have this discussion is a reflection of a real turn around in enrollment, in the financial resource it creates, and to finally get in place the critical leadership team necessary for making the school viable for the long term, and particularly in terms of an educational leader of what has the potential to be an absolutely extraordinary educational program. And having started there so many months ago, that's what we were going to do. And then through all these, that sometimes it felt like death by 1,000 cuts, that we're finally not there anymore. And that we really have the opportunity to hire, and we've had these incredible candidates come through, a great educational leader for the program. And that's always been sort of the biggest part of my dream, really, is to see this school launched well, to be viable for the long term. And here's the opportunity to actually do it. Yeah. So it's pretty exciting, actually.
It's amazing. Yeah, it takes a lot of thought to move things and respond as the landscape changes, because it's changed a lot. At least it doesn't change hour by hour anymore. It's more week to week. which is kind of the goal. But that's the nature of it too. It's and so as it changes and you get settled into certain things that won't change. This is our home. We'll be here. That's not going to change. I hope the board doesn't change a whole lot in the next year or two. Other things won't change, except that things will get added in, including leadership, and that's where it starts. Thanks. Questions?
Well, Joe, do you want to go through each one, or how do you want to?
I think we should do whatever we need to do. Yeah, in fact, I got some adjustments that I didn't want to make unilaterally, but they were smart people hide typos in the things that they asked me to read, and then they'd know whether or not I actually read them. Dave found all the typos.
No, I didn't focus on those.
You found them all. It turns out that parents don't need disciplinary action, although, Tony, to your point, sometimes maybe. And there may not be a typo. That was one of them.
Yeah, that was one.
But it's also, also embedded in these job descriptions too are reporting relationships, which are, can be tricky. It's not an easy thing to let your adolescent child out into the room of strangers and into the tender mercies of someone else, which is, this is not a whole lot different. Having said that, the reporting structure becomes an important piece of this too. And we'll see how it works. We'll see how it goes. But Dave, you had some great suggestions, if I remember right. I just didn't want to put them in.
Well, yeah, one was around the sections in both the executive director and head of school positions that describe oversight of compliance with legal requirements. My concern is that if we have two positions that are both overseeing that, sometimes things fall between the two.
Yeah.
So I think some clarification about which requirements, which positions are overseeing.
There's that or the other way to go about it, and at some point we'll have to reduce these to contract, which I think is probably the next step for at least two of them, possibly three. But sometimes you can word it in such a way that I think this would be the right way to do it, that the executive director has the final responsibility for all compliance. Mm-hmm. Having said that, the head of school day-to-day is essentially engaged in very important tactical applications of compliance requirement. Right. There's no question. There are things that happen in the classroom hour to hour that would have to be the purview of the head of school. But knowing that certain things, especially the kind of things we just went over, these are all compliance. The reporting piece is mostly that.
So that's responsible for sending and enrolling information.
That would be the executive director. But no doubt the executive director will be going back to someone to say, all right, so how are we keeping all of this, and where is it, or keeping it directly himself, if that's the way.
Well, the head would presumably have a log, for instance, of team meetings.
Yeah, and a database of students and information per student.
So, it makes sense.
It's a really good, I think it's a great question, because you've got different types, you have SIMS reports, which are, student enrollment and data, but you also have, sorry?
I just said there's a lot of reporting.
There really are.
A lot of to fall through the cracks.
And some are like LACID reports are, a professional qualification of, where you sort of report on whether your staff are highly qualified, MTEL certified, all of those components. And so, you're absolutely right. The head of school would have some direct involvement and also you track professional development. So that also is part of your state report. So the gathering of data and the actual physical reporting of it and sending it through the portal on the website are sometimes two different pieces.
But it's
figuring
also
out who best to do those roles.
Well, and it's actually not a bad thing to have it be two different people, because they're both holding other accountable for what the requirement is. But I think if it's worded that the executive director has final responsibility or ultimately responsible, then that may get at it, while still holding the head of school accountable for understanding that there are compliance requirements that he or she has to meet.
Yeah, it's all about the communication between the two positions, right?
Ultimately,
So
yeah.
that's not the-
Yeah.
The other questions I had were mostly about the program coordinator position, so I don't know if you want to get into that.
It seemed like what I looked at, there was questions about things that fell under program coordinator that might more likely be head of school. Is that sort of?
Yeah, I think that sums it up, Amy, and
Yeah.
for the most part. There were pieces about curriculum development, reference to scope and sequence development, school climate, those kinds of things. And I think, again, it seems like there's going to be some overlap between the positions and what they're doing. To sort of pinpoint those things as being falling under this position seems a little awkward to me.
Yeah, it seemed full. It seemed pretty thick.
I feel like the executive director and head of school are pretty clear. I think moving into year 2 with potentially 200 kids, you have to really thoughtfully look at the administrative structure. And I can say from someone who worked on writing the charter, we spent a lot of time on this. There's a lot of models out there. There's not one right model. And you have to find a model that fits your school. So that said, I don't know, the head of school and the executive director, how that's being repositioned at this point. But I wouldn't call this a complete administrative team. I think there are pieces that could be added. And I would look at the whole staffing picture and doing that as well.
Some of the thinking behind having a program coordinator was to enable someone who would report to the head of school to start immediately.
And that makes a ton of sense.
Because
That's a ton of sense.
Which is where, and Dave, your point's well taken on that, and I think, Amy, you were echoing it, which is, there looks like a lot that overlaps between the two. My sense is that the two, whichever two people that is, that ultimately they'll figure it out. I think the head of school candidates, and I think we'll hear more about where we are with those, are both right now, well, whichever ones they are, there may be a third, as far as I know, are strong, very strong candidates. The program coordinator working on behalf of either one who could start tomorrow where the head of school can't. They'll begin to figure it out from there.
Yeah, there's an interesting circle to be squared here, which is we need somebody immediately, and we need, especially because we don't know when the head of school can actually come on board. At the same time, it would be nice to write this and even arrange this so that the head of school has some say about that money in the longer run, just because it's actually a huge budget piece. And I would not feel comfortable about tying the hands of the new head. At the same time, we desperately need the help.
Right.
So that's the.
Makes sense.
Do you see the?
Yeah.
I mean, I know you see it.
I do, and I think for the people who will end up recruiting to these would necessarily know certain things. One is, this is starting our second year. So they get a sense for where we're going, where we're starting from, where we're going. If this isn't so-called broken field runner, or someone who can move with it or change, just the way we've just done, actually, or are about to, I think. Change the role and change an emphasis, or reduce this, or hand off part of this job, which may happen, or whatever can happen. I think it goes with the territory that the person who would succeed as program coordinator would have to be very flexible and very, very organized at the same time. All of these things can change. We don't know the head count on opening day.
Right. I mean, given those realities, Joe, perhaps it makes sense to agree to whether we need to move ahead
And realize that it has to be revisited.
But revisit with perhaps that person in the role and reevaluate what that description was. I mean, they have a head of school involved in that discussion as well.
Head of school,
Certainly.
Yeah, no, it's, in fact, if anything, you'd love to be able to bring on a head of school who gets to do this. You would ideally, the head of school would happen first, and then whatever happens after that. But the problem is it's May 4th.
Yeah.
And the head of school undoubtedly can't start, I can't imagine starting before mid-June, if not July 1. Someone here to finish out the year, assuming that someone that currently has a job.
And there's a few projects to be done.
That's right.
Well, I mean, one of them is, through the chair, one of them is critical, which is that we are hiring in the neighborhood of 10 additional staff.
Right.
Huge.
Even if you only have 3 per position, that's 30 interviews, 30 class teaching observations.
That's 30 if you find the ones you want.
Right.
Yeah.
So clearly, the first, one of the first basic tasks of this job is to set that up. Because that's a very complicated. It's a very complicated business.
Very important.
It is, and I think if there's understanding on the part of the people who would come in, and I think the people you've been talking to, we've all been talking to a little bit, have a pretty good sense for.
In this meeting, we'll probably have to move on, but I agree with David that revisiting this is essential. I mean, it's absolutely essential. I'd just like to say how pleased I am that there is, an agreement on this, and that what at times was a really very difficult pieces of negotiation got done, and how proud I am that everybody kept talking to each other, even after many of us felt like jumping in the harbor.
Whether we've been in the harbor all along.
Suicidal over this. So I'm really proud of this group.
Me too. Me too. There's a lot of passion. Apparently the school has some meaning to it. It matters. But yeah, I agree with that. And knowing that ultimately, I think the idea is, and the fun of this, I think in part, is that we get to revisit everything at a certain point, and especially that, given that a lieutenant, essentially, to a head of school will be coming in before the head of school.
I hope it's a sign of a new era in doing this stuff. And one key to it.
Which part?
One key to it might be that you just used the word we have not often used, fun.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It should be easy too. It shouldn't, as you and I talked about the other day, easy doesn't mean it isn't hard work.
Right.
It means it should be more straightforward than, but the climate will change, things will happen.
So do we need to vote on these job descriptions?
I'd like a vote because I think we owe something into the charter school office.
Right.
And I also think that this will kick off the process that you and I were talking about. I did talk to council today to say, by Friday,
Transfer these into contracts.
Yeah, make this official or legal or whatever it is. I think it's moving a couple things into, there's a contract to amend, and maybe a couple of other simple, they'll end up being letter offers or appendices to letter offers or something like that.
Whose final purvey was enrollment numbers? Executive director.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially because that accrues to the financial piece of it. And thank you, Concordia, thank you for that.
Yep. Just to keep the whip cracking on the boy. Can't take away all the stuff he does.
Boy's doing okay.
I'll make a crack at making a motion.
Please.
I move to accept the executive director and his school position as written, as well as program coordinator, with the understanding that these may be revisited.
Oh, well.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor? Nicely done.
Freaking love fest.
Now we're just getting started. Let's go back to 7, performance review methodology, because I think it's an important issue to address. And Tony, you and I talked a little bit about, and I don't know that it's appropriate to mention your name right now, but it's a consultant who I've been talking to, who was introduced to me by Leslie Pelton, who did our strategic planning piece. And I know that others of us have talked to other people about this. I'm going to suggest, especially because the executive director's job has just, or is about to, change by definition, literally.
Thank God.
Between now and yeah, the work will go way down from here on. We count on it. It's going to be totally different. There's no sense reviewing that if this is going to change going forward. There's also no sense reviewing a head of school or other members of the leadership team that aren't yet started. I also have been given the advice that the performance review or evaluation, or whatever we're going to call it, reasonably, especially for the executive director and the head of school, reasonably starts with governance, the governance committee. So I'm going to suggest that the governance committee add that topic. Now we have time, not an imminent issue, but it's something to consider. And if you would, I'd ask the chair of the governance committee to, whatever time it takes, within the next few months, to come back with a recommendation for how to go about evaluating the executive director and I think the head of school. I don't think maybe the SPED director, but I'd leave that up to the governance committee too.
I think that's that piece when I talk about looking at the whole administrative
Yeah.
process.
Well, this is
Where is
evaluation.
the SPED director, right?
That's right. So
But
for
can I suggest to also put the timeline of that so that, you know.
well, I was just saying within the next couple of months.
Yeah, I think Joe's giving us a lot of birth here. I figured this out, and my understanding is that there are always some metrics for evaluations on file, which we'd like to take a look at from the charter itself. There are probably some other best practices that much better educational backgrounds than me.
Art and I collected some as well.
Yeah, which would be a terrific exercise for us to go through. And
That'd be good. Yeah.
so I think what we just do.
Yeah, we can,
Art has them all around.
okay.
So is that okay with?
Yeah, we can totally accept that charge, absolutely.
I would just emphasize that I think this is a really important task that in my world at work and whatnot, that evaluation is one of the good evaluation and or the quality of evaluation is sort of one of the hallmarks of whether organizations are high quality organizations. So
Yeah.
it's really important.
Yeah, and in that vein, I'd ask that we consider something that's ongoing.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
which is-
much more beneficial.
Yeah, and can be simpler and you know,
Yes.
it's usually a matter of
Simple is
mindfulness
good. complicated takes, doesn't
Simple,
happen.
it has to be simple.
Yeah.
And that's
Simple is good,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Good. There's an item board membership, but I'd like to postpone that.
Mhm.
Can I speak to that since I'm on there?
Hmm?
Can I speak to it since I'm on there or no?
Depends on what you're gonna say. What are you gonna say, and then I'll let you know whether you'll be allowed to say. I have a very crisp style.
I think you have to take a
In case we hadn't
chance.
noticed.
I think you have to take a chance.
All right, well, that's why I'm here, to take a chance. There's an even bigger chance I may take later on, but let's get to this one first and see how it goes.
All right, so I see on here until beginning of August, and I feel like I gotta take it month to month. And I'm here, and a little bit,
Like I said, we're gonna postpone this.
I want to be very clear that I think, we're coming to the end of our first year, a year that, in many ways has been difficult. And I feel like I have a strong commitment to maintain a charter that we will be evaluated on in 5 years or 4 years now. And so I feel like in the next couple months, as we're changing leadership and changing, I want to see how the spirit of the charter is being implemented. Because I have concerns about that. So that's my thing for staying on the board.
Good.
And if you feel veering the wrong way, I'm not that interested.
No,
I was gonna say, it sounds like you want to stay on longer than through August, right?
No, I don't.
Well, no, and I think, to the, but that's good. That's great.
Because I have concerns, but I'm hoping as we move,
Oh, yeah.
forward, I'd like those concerns, I'd like to see how those concerns will be played out, and
Right.
what will be the tenor of what we're looking for next year.
Right, exactly, and this is why there'll be some more discussion, because for the same reasons, I think it's important that you be here to make sure that happens.
Yeah,
There's a,
it's too steep of a hill.
oh, the hill will be steep, but we'll be in it together, it'll be fun. So we'll talk about it some more.
Yeah, I think once the new head of school is on, that will inform more, whether that person, how they look at the charter and how they look at what's here and how they're going to make those two things mesh.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So did we postpone number 9, or board membership or something?
We tried to postpone it.
No, let's keep going.
So now we're gonna put, yes, we're postponing it.
Okay.
All right, so we'll talk.
Just regarding the finance committee, Joe,
Mm-hmm.
if we're going to be calling a meeting in the near future, do we need to know that, who's going to do that?
I do, I'm actually
It was a
gonna,
first order issue there.
yeah, I got a couple because I think there's a board meeting to schedule for early next week too, so we can get done the documentation that we were just talking about. Do we, it's interesting, the vice chair piece in 10, so we'll cover 9 again at presumably the next board meeting. But it looks like 10 and 13 are covering we're covering the same. The governance committee want to report?
Yeah, we discussed a vice chair position, and in that discussion, we also came up with the fact that we still need to round out on our board the rest of the traditional regular positions like secretary, treasurer, and that.
Clerk.
The clerk, yeah. So this means that the upshot of this is that I'm soliciting suggestions for those roles. I will send you a memo. We discussed two things that are linked here. The vice chair and sort of officers of the board as a kind of an executive committee of the board, which would be useful when we have emergencies, as we sometimes do. It would be useful to have a group who could meet and do the business of the board like that. So I'll send an email around soliciting suggestions for those roles, and I'll tie that into a wider discussion, rather far-ranging, that James and I had at our meeting today about skills and talents that the board needs and is still short of, and solicit specific suggestions of people. And I will undertake, as the governing committee chair, I'll undertake to try and, if somebody suggests me a name, which I haven't been acting on, actually, I've been too busy with other things, but if somebody solicits a name now, I'll try and get a board member to talk to the person and then give us an informal report, and then somebody else can talk to them, and, you know, we can proceed to sort of see whether people are a good match. Good. Suggested people are a good match. Good. For this board. I'll do that. Okay, great.
Tony, can you report on your school, which is 11?
We have two finalists at the moment, very strong candidates. The board held a meeting to meet with several semifinalists, and my hope is that we could schedule a meeting for early next week, for Monday or thereabouts, so that the second of the two finalists could be met and ask the same questions that the other candidates were asked. I think we had a long discussion about that and the benefit of everyone hearing the responses at the same time in the same place. And I asked for, and parents, faculty have met both candidates and have written up their thoughts regarding the finalists, parents also met, were invited to meet the two finalists as well, and many of them have sent in their thoughts. And my hope would be that we will complete this process. I was in touch with both candidates to go and visit their schools for the end of this week and very beginning of next week. And references have been called, and they are extraordinary, just really outstanding for both candidates. And the goal really would be to have the appointment made by the end of the day, Monday, or first thing Tuesday morning next week.
Next week.
Mm-hmm.
I'm putting that in writing.
You heard it here.
Yeah.
I did. It's in the minutes. It's official.
Actually, you'll be able to watch it later.
Excellent.
So the board meeting would be like Monday or Tuesday?
I think it would be Tuesday, if we can do, if that, does that work for, we can hop for that if you want. Or Tuesday? Okay. Why don't we hop to that too, because I think, it sounds like we'll need a finance committee meeting also. I don't know that we need governance quite so soon, but we need finance. Or we do it just before the board meeting.
Yeah,
If you want, does that work for you?
5:10, I mean the 10th,
Yeah, yeah.
7 o'clock.
Well, finance would be early, can you?
Well, finance would be 6.
6,
Yeah.
we're going to do 6.
And we'll have a, Tony, we probably have a sense of the enrollment, how, you know, what the CSO's response to enrollment is.
We should, absolutely.
Okay. And we also should, I'm hoping by Friday, have something back from Foley.
So we're finance at 6,
Finance at 6,
board at 7.
Board at 7, that works. Amy, does that work for you?
I don't have my husband's schedule, so hopefully.
So we have a lot to talk about. There's a lot to talk about. I'd like to go to 14, which I think is the last open item. To say I'm eager to accommodate the recommendation of the governance committee. I do want to talk to Amy a little more, because I think that's an important part of what will help us all succeed with the new board chair. I know that there were 1 or 2 members of the board who had questions for me that we haven't been able to address specifically. But what I'd like to do is put that item at the top of the agenda for the next board meeting.
Okay.
Also, there were concerns voiced by Art, being that a couple of us are aware of that. I'm actually going to visit with him tomorrow. And I think it'd be helpful to be able to say that this will happen during my conversation with Art. And then I haven't yet met one of the candidates.
Could I just say something?
Please.
I think our discussion of that with some of us made me think that he is the canary in our coal mine about sort of the way we've been letting the sort of culture of the board go in directions that weren't helpful and didn't help us do our business. So for many reasons, I'm actually really grateful to Art for saying stop.
I told him,
Stop.
I actually thanked him today because he seemed to have gotten a lot done. He was good.
Yeah.
So I'm set to talk to him tomorrow. And then I do think it's important for whoever the next board chair is to be pretty tightly aligned with whoever the next head of school is.
Yes.
And vice versa.
Right.
And I'm enamored of the one that I've spent time with, but one of them I haven't talked to yet. So I'm hoping I'll find time between now and Monday to do that. Haven't waited, so. But I'll put it on the top of the agenda for next time. And
Can I ask a question about the vice chair? Is that something we have to vote on?
it
Says,
I think technically it comes out of the governance committee, which is where it reasonably belongs. So the governance committee can recommend that we have the vice chair, which I
have
think
the position of vice chair, I'm not talking about, right?
That's right.
And do we have to vote, do we have to vote on having the position?
It
I don't think technically, no.
It can be established by the chair of the board, just like establishing committees, which is like which goes on the agenda for next time too, because communications and outreach would become something having to do with facilities and outreach. And I think the chair could just do that. So the next piece is for the governance committee to entertain, as Chair was reporting, nominations for vice chair.
Yeah. We'll do.
Through the chair, just for my notes here. So the piece that you're putting at the top of the agenda is the chair of the board of trustees, item number 15 on our current agenda. Is that what it is?
It's number 15.
14.
Because I think there's a vote, and it would essentially go into the agenda the same way. So the board will consider and vote on a recommendation of the governance committee made during the April 6th meeting for Joan Willis to become chair of the board of trustees. Or not.
He understood or not.
He said, or not.
So Joe, should we talk about anything else for that agenda?
Please, yeah, in fact, I wrote a couple things down. One was the 501c3.
I have a list from, again, just, we can bring it up in the meeting.
I think for the next time.
Yeah, for the next time, what we'll do is, I'll just say that hopefully we'll have many of the things collected, so we'll have an update on that at the next meeting.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, and then the minutes to make sure that we'll set, and I'll come back with this idea that Tony and I were just talking about as essentially a clerk, a secretary. And we'll see if we can make that work.
I'll write you a check to make that happen.
It's worth money. Whoa!
Poor Dave.
And board
frightening, actually.
For all on board, which isn't very much, Joe.
And you're going to put board membership on the next, item number 9 on the next agenda too?
Yes.
Because I'd like to propose under that one that we talk about a parent member of the board.
That would go through the governance.
And-
That's-
Through governance, fine, okay.
And that's,
Yep.
Yeah, good.
yes,
Okay.
we're great, important.
Amen.
Yep. And then parent survey to get a look at that and a review of that. I think it's probably not too soon to formally establish the facilities committee, whatever we're going to call it. And if someone has ideas about that, please let me know. What else?
The additional item I have, Joe, is we have a review by the state, and the board of
On the
education
24th.
meeting on the 24th.
Yep.
And I think we had a discussion about
Good.
getting organized for that.
Good idea.
In fact, Colin sent me something today saying,
Yeah.
take a look at this.
Tell me the date again.
The 24th.
So that will be establishing who will be there, what needs to happen between now and then.
That's it. Good.
So I'm thinking that we need to schedule another board meeting in May besides this one on Tuesday. And we should look at potentially setting that up now. But that would be another agenda item, is the posting issue. Seems we need another posting person.
Well, and then I even go a step further into that and say, at
The
some
same
point,
thing, I know.
yeah. Because
So, but
ultimately
we're
that's-
reaching a critical point, as I understand it.
Yeah.
This guy's
Yeah.
done.
Well,
So-
and then the next piece is, and maybe this is the last task, you and I should talk about it, I think, because it's getting the final site stuff done and out and in, and because that ultimately is the solution to it, where we do our own postings.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that maybe another meeting, we can put that on to the next meeting, is postings and website.
It can go on the 10th, I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But then after the 10th, I'm looking at the fact that it's, or we did May then or whatever, we're almost into June, and being selfish of my concerns about what is the direction. At that point, we have a head of school, and so in a meeting prior to be, at that point, we really have to be looking at who's coming on board and
Oh, yeah.
what the administration structure is going to look like.
So is it a week after the
And
10th or
10th.
2 weeks?
I think it's 2 weeks. probably.
Okay,
Because somebody's coming on board, we're going to give them 2 weeks at least.
Yeah.
But it's not June, is my point.
No, it's not, yeah.
It's not June.
That's right. Does that sound right, Tony? So 2, so if we meet on the 10th, 6th and 7 o'clock on the 10th, then we'll do another one on the 22nd.
So if we can post that now,
It's also Tuesday.
yeah, and we have that done.
We can post it and add the agenda.
And have the agenda.
22nd is not a Tuesday.
Yeah.
I'm day of the meeting.
It's the day, right, yeah.
So should we be meeting before the meeting?
Yeah,
On the 23rd, then, the Monday,
we probably should. Thursday.
or the week before?
I don't know, it depends on what the meeting's about.
I think the week before makes more sense.
Yeah, it's better, if I would say it's probably it's Tuesday the 17th.
Okay, so then,
Well,
the new head of
this-
school's gonna get up and run really fast.
Well,
That's
the-
okay.
Well, or the head of
That's
school,
okay.
because the head of school would have started, but the program coordinator.
Whatever, there
Yeah.
needs to be some direction. And
Right, well-
somebody,
And
I'm
some
assuming even though the head of
conversation.
school's not on board, that they're gonna get involved in that.
I'd say it's the
I agree
7th,
if they're not.
it's the 17th.
So it's,
What day of the week is that? Tuesday? I have a meeting, I'll try to get out of it.
You want to say that Wednesday?
What's the date?
do that Wednesday. So you have one board meeting a week for the next
Yeah,
3 weeks.
not to mention subcommittees.
Yeah.
It's a crucial.
The 18th, I think that's-
It's the bottom line.
Yeah. The week of the 16th would be better for me. We could plan on that somewhere.
You want to make it on a Wednesday, Corey?
I could do the Wednesday.
So what's the?
The 18th.
18th.
Yeah, that'll work. That's
7, 6, 9, 7? or
So
just-
part of what's on the agenda for
Yeah.
that day
It's
is.
just the 7th.
just the 7th. For now, there's probably something that happens before that, because that could be the easiest time for a
Governance.
governance or program committee, because it depends on.
Program committee already has a date to meet next week.
Next Thursday.
Okay, and so as long as we have a sense for what we may need from the program committee for the 24th.
We have an agenda for that as well. But so the agenda item for the 18th, part of that would be the visit of the 23rd. And preparation for that.
24th. Yeah.
Friday the 13th.
What else? What are we missing?
I think we're about ready to move to.
Does anyone have any questions? I know, I surprised you with that. I'm actually not supposed to do that. So, but you've been so, I mean,
It's very hard to ask questions at the beginning.
no, I know, and it's not, but you know what, let's do this. Let's adjourn unless there's further business that we haven't covered that was on the agenda. And I'll ask the same questions. Leave, so we're not out of compliance.
I make a motion that we adjourn.